Discover the incredible Victorian cure for women, a transformative and touching tale exposed. Emily Harper brushed dust from the spine of an ancient Victorian medical journal, her heart racing as its fragile pages crackled softly. Nested among volumes of forgotten knowledge in the university library, this treasure hinted at secrets long buried. A cure for women's ailments. The implications sent shivers down her spine. The very thought ignited a flicker of hope against the suffocating atmosphere of the male-driven medical world surrounding her. Yet, as she ventured deeper into the unassuming text, doubt flickered alongside ambition. The oppressive gaze of Dr. Thompson, her mentor, loomed large over Emily's mind. Would he even listen if she dared to present her findings? Women's issues belong to the past, he would tell her with an air of complacency that twisted her stomach in knots. The mantra echoed against the backdrop of her dreams, where passion for women's health wrestled daily with the reality of being a mere research assistant. Her fingers trembled, feeling the weight of history's ghosts urging her to give voice to their struggles. They had fought battles she only glimpsed. Could she continue their fight? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As she read, she discovered fragments of women's lives unraveling before her eyes. Each one carried tales of resilience that resonated deeply, sparking both pride and anxiety. What if one of these women, someone she idolized for her bravery, was tied to her own bloodline? The crushing weight of familial legacy hung heavily as Emily battled with a rising tide of despair. This interconnectedness felt like both a privilege and a curse, leaving her struggling with the fear of stepping into the limelight. What if her ambitions could echo the voices of her ancestors? The frantic pace of her thoughts quickened, like a pendulum swinging dangerously as she approached a pivotal moment in her career. The presentation loomed ahead, an unforgiving horizon. Emily envisioned standing before the panel, the room alive with judgment as they glazed over her findings. She had wrestled with whether the Victorian cure could shift paradigms in women's health. Could she risk everything to unveil the truth that might again plunge women's issues into the forefront, or would it merely deepen the patriarchal divides she so desperately wanted to dissolve? Her stomach knotted with the weight of indecision. In the quiet moments of night, she could scarcely breathe, feeling the walls of academia pressing in on her. What lay behind her decision? Rejection? Validation? The delicate dance between the past and her ambition felt impossibly tangled. As final preparations consumed her every waking hour, dread coiled tighter. Would she stand strong or be silenced, just like those before her? Each potential outcome played like a film on repeat in her mind, with an unsettling climax building towards that desperate breath before entering the spotlight. Just before she stepped through the door, trembling fingers hovered over her notes, unsure if the ghosts of the past would empower her or leave her alone in the shadows. The air trembled with anticipation, each decision spiraling into an uncertainty that both terrified and exhilarated her. What awaited her on the other side? Would she honor the legacy or remain bound by the restraints of a world that tried to erase them? The question hung like a thundercloud, pregnant with possibility, as she braced herself against the threshold of an uncertain future. The room was dimly lit, casting long shadows that combined with the anxious energy swirling in Emily's chest. As she took a deep breath, she let the musty scent of old books wash over her, grounding her in history while reminding her of her own aspirations. She could hear her heart pounding in her ears, a relentless drum signaling the beginning of a war she felt ill-prepared to wage. The faculty lounge awaited an intimidating arena where her voice would either reverberate with truth or fade silently into the background. A single tap on the door startled her from her thoughts. It was Dr. Thompson. The skeptical look he wore was a reminder of the many times he had dismissed her ideas. Stray strands of silver threaded through his dark hair, but his expression remained unchanged. "You're ready, Emily." His tone was flat, ready to dissect her work as he had so many times before. Did he sense her fear? A flicker of doubt crept through her resolve. She wanted to reply confidently, to assert her presence, yet her throat tightened. Yes. The word felt small amid the weight of expectation. With shaky hands, she stepped into the spotlight of the lounge. The panel, a mix of seasoned academics and a few fresh faces, gathered, their gazes pinning her under scrutiny. She positioned her notes carefully, embodying a calm she didn't feel. The clatter of her racing thoughts momentarily subsided as she unearthed the first slide of her presentation. "Thank you for the opportunity to speak today," she began, her voice slightly wavering. "What I've uncovered in the Victorian medical texts may revolutionize our understanding of women's health issues that have been dismissed under the guise of time and societal norms." A murmur rumbled through the panel, but she pressed on. With each passing moment, fragments of her research ignited her passion. She spoke of the women whose lives were suppressed and the remedies that had been sidelined. The warmth from the sunlight filtering through the window seemed to bolster her conviction as she explained peculiar remedies that addressed women's issues, interwoven with the names and anecdotes of women who had suffered and thrived, yet not all expressions among the panelists mirrored her fervor. Dr. Thompson leaned forward, brow furrowed. "You're suggesting we revert to outdated practices based on literature that lacks contemporary scientific validation? You know that's not going to pass muster." A crack of doubt threatened to destabilize her, but she couldn't let it. "What I suggest is we open a discourse on these remedies with modern frameworks. Women have suffered long enough due to the ignorance surrounding their health." The words ignited something in her. She was channeling not just her hopes but also the countless voices that had become mute over the decades. "Emily, context matters. These cures could be harmful." "You tread a dangerous line," another panelist interjected, shattering the fervor momentarily. Green eyes fixed on Dr. Thompson, poised to respond but fearing the backlash. Could the critical opinions act as courage boosters rather than the suffocating weight they seem to be? "Maybe it's time we examine not just historical failures but triumphs as well," she fired back, heart racing, while her voice quivered slightly, the fierce flames of determination lit her eyes. It was not merely about the presentation now but a deeper truth she had unearthed. The conversation was essential, even if it invited contention. As the final slide faded, she realized part of her had stepped beyond the reach of indecision. Emily felt raw, exposed, yet liberated. She had ignited a spark, one that could forge paths through the shadows of history, but as she awaited the panel's verdict, uncertainty gnawed once more at her resolve. Had she truly broken through the barriers or merely scratched their surfaces? With mounting dread, she realized the next word spoken would determine not just the outcome of her presentation but the course of her career. A new wave of fear washed over her. What were the stakes of her ambition? What awaited beyond the verdict of the panel? The air pulsed with unasked questions, one in particular looming large: was she truly ready to bear the weight of the truth? The moment felt suspended in time, each heartbeat echoing in Emily's ears like a tumultuous wave crash. She was acutely aware of the panel's eyes, their gazes dissecting her, anticipating her intellectual fall, a reminder of how far she had come from the timid outsider she once was. Beneath the surface of her fluttering confidence lay a flicker of resolve. This was her ground, her time to weave the tapestry of their collective past with threads of women's unheard voices. Dr. Thompson stood to break the silence, and Emily steeled herself for the impending storm. "Your insights are provocative, Emily, but there's a significant gap here: safety. Women's health is not just about discussing old texts but ensuring contemporary practices protect them." His tone, though authoritative, held a disdain that stung. "But finding alternatives is pivotal," Emily countered, not ready to yield her hard-earned ground. "If we ignore these historical remedies, we risk perpetuating ignorance. It's not just about safety, it's about understanding what has been lost." The panel shifted their dynamics, and Emily felt the subtle vibrations of a challenge awakening her inner tenacity. As they discussed their hesitations, she sought ways to anchor her argument in the grounded reality of women's experiences, not merely as patients, but as individuals with stories that mattered. With each rebuttal she delivered, she explored the corridors of her knowledge and began erecting bridges between what was known and what could be. The debate further ignited. Emily sensed every nerve in her body vibrating with newfound vigor. Gradually, she began to articulate her thoughts with more coherence. Science has advanced, but we cannot neglect perspectives from the past that highlight women's lived experiences. To exclude those lessons is a disservice to our current understanding. The room, initially filled with skepticism, began to shift. She fired up her final argument. Imagine the women who endured when their health concerns were dismissed. The centuries of silence compounded their suffering. Shouldn't our goal be to empower their narratives in a way that translates to present-day knowledge? She saw a flicker of intrigue ignite in the eyes of one panelist, a shift that strengthened her belief in the potential of her argument. A door was ajar, and she was ready to step through if only they would follow. Finally, as the discussion wound down, the air hung thick with a complexity of thoughts and feelings. Each panelist nodded contemplatively, an acknowledgement shimmered among fierce critiques. A realization washed over Emily. She wasn't solely there to defend her work against critique, she was also helping cultivate a dialogue that had long been dormant. But as Dr. Thompson prepared to summarize the discussion, a concern gripped her. Would they understand the weight of the transformation she had intended? Would they embrace the importance of revisiting the past to empower the future? The professor's voice broke through her panicked thoughts. Your presentation has merit, and we appreciate the fresh discourse you provoke. But the intonation remained guarded. This is not an endorsement of your views, however. I, too, see the value in exploration. A revision is necessary. We will need more data. A mix of frustration and affirmation rushed through Emily. It was a cautious victory, a small crack in a wall that felt like an impenetrable fortress. As she left the lounge, exhilaration washed over her. She had weathered the scrutiny and lived to tell the tale. She had survived the gauntlet. But now, the real question surfaced: could she take this fragile breakthrough and solidify it into something transformational? What solid arguments could she gather to defend the unknown remedies? Resting on her knowledge wasn't enough, she needed more. Inspiration welled up in her, raw and powerful, but doubts tangled within it. Could she trust herself to probe deeper, to chase the elusive truths waiting to be unveiled? As she prepared for the next steps, a coiled desire urged her on. She needed to search for those remedies, to unearth truths long buried beneath layers of neglect. This journey was only just beginning, and she was determined to follow every lead. What if these elusive remedies could lead her to a larger revelation? Would they challenge current practices in ways she hadn't yet imagined? Emily felt the weight of expectation settle on her shoulders like a familiar cloak. With the tentative approval from Dr. Thompson dangling like a thread overhead, she needed to transform that momentary recognition into something concrete. The exhilaration of the discussion faded, replaced by the silent roar of her own uncertainties. She packed her satchel with books filled with historical accounts of female health treatments, her fingers grazing the worn spines. These texts were more than mere pages, they were a battlefield where women's voices awaited resurrection. In the quiet of her home office, lit solely by the fading afternoon light, Emily unfurled her notes. Her desk was strewn with crumpled pages filled with half-formed thoughts, sketches of potential arguments, and scattered memories of past presentations. She yearned for coherence, but it was eluding her. Flipping through various accounts, she stumbled upon a reference to a Victorian remedy involving herbal concoctions. The text hinted at deep-seated beliefs about female wellness but lacked empirical grounding. She was intrigued. What if these remedies offered a perspective that could bridge the gap Dr. Thompson had pointed out between historical understanding and contemporary practice? The thought pulled at her. This was a thread worth pulling, a seam that could unravel a larger narrative. But with every advance came a wave of doubt. Was she chasing ghosts? Was her determination founded on scholarly ambition, or was she driven by a deeper, unresolved connection to her own experiences? It had been years since she lost her mother to dismissed health complaints, sentiments that echoed the historical neglect she now sought to illuminate. The thought haunted her, fueling her purpose but also muddling her resolve. Emily pressed on, drafting a research proposal that would outline her need for more empirical evidence to support her arguments. She wrote of interviews with women from diverse backgrounds, of gathering their stories as a necessary tapestry woven into the fabric of treatment methods, a melding of past and present. It felt audacious yet simultaneously empowering. There she was, a bridge across an expansive chasm. As the sun set, casting shadows across her workspace, she decided to reach out. Emily picked up her phone, her pulse quickening. The task seemed monumental. She would need to connect with professionals who specialized in women's health, historians, and perhaps even women still practicing these remedies. Crafting her message required meticulous word selection. She aimed to convey a sense of urgency without sounding frantic. "Dear Dr. Lewis," she typed. "I am looking to gather narratives and insights on Victorian-era health practices for women, specifically focusing on herbal remedies." Each word was both a leap of faith and an act of bravery, proving to herself that she was ready to explore her ambitious inquiry, seeking alliances rather than futile battles. Hitting send ignited a flutter of anxiety in her stomach, dread mixing with anticipation. With every moment that passed, she found herself overwhelmed by possibility and dread. What if she opened the door only to be met with ridicule? What if her journey into the past unveiled truths she was unprepared to confront, yet determination held fast? It was a fork in the road, and her decision to embrace the unknown set her pulse racing. She left the office, stepping outside into the cool night air. The stars felt like a backdrop to her aspirations, illuminating the path ahead. Despite the nebulous uncertainties that loomed, she had to believe that she could awaken something significant, something transformative. As she walked, her phone buzzed with a notification. An email had arrived from Dr. Lewis, the subject line simply reading, "Your inquiry." Her heart leapt. It was time to discover if the shadows she pursued would coalesce into reality or evaporate into thin air. Would the response from Dr. Lewis guide her toward groundbreaking revelations, or had she merely entered a labyrinth of fleeting hope? Emily barely slept that night. Each time she closed her eyes, her thoughts spiraled, a tornado of possibilities and fears. The faint glow of her phone screen illuminated her desk, beckoning her to unlock the notifications she knew awaited her. Time and again, her heart leapt at the prospect of finding a reply from Dr. Lewis, only to sink once more when she remembered the risks involved. As dawn broke, pale light seeped into her small office, shifting her focus from anxiety to action. She couldn't let self-doubt smother this opportunity. The email from Dr. Lewis could very well be a stepping stone, or a stumbling block. Emily needed to prepare herself for either outcome. After a quick breakfast, she dove back into her research, her laptop's screen reflecting her growing resolve. She was no longer merely writing for academic approval, she was delving into a shared history, a narrative that mattered deeply to her and the countless women before her. What if her work could shine a light on the voices history had silenced? As she explored Victorian-era remedies, her focus sharpened. The herbal combinations she read about held peculiar properties, often entwined with societal expectations, healing, nurturing, and aligning a woman's body with nature. She scribbled notes, tracing connections between these historical practices and the current state of women's health. The task felt monumental, yet her growing compulsion to uncover connections spurred her on. In the process, she recognized a deeper goal. Not only did she wish to establish a scholarly argument, but also to reclaim the narratives of women who had been marginalized. Each remedy spoke of resilience, of community, and of a search for autonomy. Parallels began to emerge between those women's struggles and her own experiences with her mother. This realization sparked a new determination within her. Her personal journey was intertwined with the historical tapestry she aimed to weave. A buzz from her phone interrupted her thoughts. A new message from Dr. Lewis. Heart racing, she clicked open the email. "Dear Emily," it began, "I was intrigued by your inquiry and would be happy to discuss your ideas further." A sudden rush of elation flooded over her. This wasn't just an acknowledgement, it was an invitation to engage in dialogue, to challenge ideas, and to illuminate truths. Emily leaned forward, fingers hovering over her keyboard. What should be her next move? How could she present her burgeoning thoughts effectively, while still remaining open to Dr. Lewis's expertise. With renewed vigor, she drafted a response, carefully articulating her thoughts and questions. The importance of historical context, the role of perception in women's health, and how they both intersect with contemporary practices were vital topics that demanded exploration. Her words flowed, and with every key pressed, she felt empowered, like an artist finally unleashing their colors on a canvas. Days passed as Emily immersed herself in preparatory reading and interviews, determined to gather a diverse range of narratives. Each voice she encountered told a story of resilience, echoing her own desire to form connections that transcended time. Some women spoke of their ancestors' struggles, detailing how the echoes of history still influenced their lives today. Others revealed personal health battles that seemed to echo those Victorian remedies' persistence against the odds, yet, glimpses of insecurity still slithered into her mind. Could her findings ever do justice to the lives and stories she was collecting? Would academia acknowledge their significance, or would they remain as footnotes clinging to the margins? These questions lingered as Emily navigated through her research, wielding them with both trepidation and determination. Each moment felt like a test of her commitment, a chance to confront the ghosts that haunted her past. Suddenly, she realized that a significant confrontation was looming on the horizon. Her planned meeting with Dr. Lewis approached rapidly, a gateway toward professional validation and personal metamorphosis. A mixture of excitement and dread intertwined within her as the date approached, until one seemingly ordinary morning, she found herself at a cafe waiting for Dr. Lewis. What awaited her in this meeting could redefine not only her research direction but also her own understanding of her place within this narrative. As she watched the door, anticipation coursed through her veins. Would this encounter embolden her vision, or would it force her to reevaluate everything she had worked toward? The moment of truth was nearly at hand. As the cafe door swung open, a gust of cool air announced Dr. Lewis's arrival. Emily straightened in her seat, heart pounding, feeling a rush that mingled with her anxiety. She quickly observed the professor's confident stride, her posture embodying authority. Emily's mind raced. How could she project the very same assurance while submerged in this sea of self-doubt? "Emily," Dr. Lewis greeted with a warm smile, extending her hand. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Their handshake was firm, yet Emily felt the slight tremor in her own fingers. She fought to conceal it, drawing from the resolve she had harnessed over the past weeks. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Emily replied, her voice steady despite the internal storm. They settled into a small corner table, the ambient noise of grinding coffee beans and distant chatter amplifying the intensity of their conversation. The moment felt surreal. She was finally face to face with a mentor she revered. Dr. Lewis wasted no time. "I found your inquiry quite compelling," she said, leaning forward. "You're tackling an important yet overlooked aspect of women's history. Tell me more about your findings." Emily took a deep breath, and as she began to speak, she felt a fire ignite within her. "I've been researching Victorian remedies, looking not just at the herbs and their physical effects but at the stories behind them. Each remedy seems to reflect the societal expectations of women and their roles in health and healing." As she described her growing collection of narratives, she found herself transforming. The confidence that had once eluded her began to surface. She was reclaiming her voice not just for herself but for the women she aimed to represent. With each story she recounted, she connected deeper to her mission. Dr. Lewis listened intently, nodding thoughtfully, her brows furrowing at points that struck an emotional chord. The conversation flowed, and just as Emily began to feel like the expert she aspired to be, a shadow crept back into her mind. What if Dr. Lewis dismissed her insights as naive? Would her interpretations hold up against established scholarship? To shake off the anxiety, Emily focused her attention on Dr. Lewis, studying the way she engaged with ideas. The professor had an uncanny ability to dissect notions, offering both criticism and encouragement. She was not just a figure of authority, she was a vessel of potential guidance. Perhaps she could learn to embrace critique without it sinking her spirit. "So," Dr. Lewis interjected, "have you thought about how you will position your argument within the contemporary discourse on women's health?" That question snapped Emily's thoughts back into focus. The way her heart raced felt tangible. She hesitated, grappling with the challenge. I want to celebrate the resilience of women throughout history, showing how their battles resonate today. But I worry that the significance of those stories might be overlooked in academia. Dr. Lewis leaned back, a thoughtful expression gracing her features. That concern reflects your deep commitment, she said. But remember, we can't control how others interpret our work. Focus instead on what you want to convey. Your voice matters. These words, a gentle push, ignited a surge of conviction within Emily. She was no longer just a student lost in uncertainty, she was an emerging scholar with something powerful to share. Yet, as the session neared its close, doubt began to tiptoe back into the shadows of her mind. How could she ensure her work would carve a new pathway rather than be lost in the vastness of academic discourse? I would love to see your first draft, Dr. Lewis added as they stood to leave. Let me provide feedback. You're on the verge of something meaningful. The blend of apprehension and excitement coursed through Emily as they exchanged contact information and stepped outside. The sun blazed brightly, a stark contrast to the internal uncertainty swirling within her. She felt exhilarated, a sense of purpose unfurling, yet still entwined with the fear of inadequacy. As she walked away, she pondered her next steps. Would she have the courage to explore bold arguments? Could she articulate her understanding in a way that demanded recognition? With the prospect of sharing her first draft looming, Emily stood at the precipice of both vulnerability and potential growth. That evening, as she stared at her blank document, fingers hovering above the keys, she realized this was not just about practice, it was about stepping fully into her role as a scholar. The moment was crucial. Could she embrace the compelling narrative she had gathered without shying away? The stakes were rising higher than ever. Suddenly, a new thought gripped her as she hesitated. Was she willing to confront the fundamental doubts coursing through her veins? The time had come to face not only her external challenges but the deeply rooted insecurities that threatened her professional journey. Would she stand tall, armed with her stories, or would the weight of uncertainty pull her down? The following morning, Emily sat on the edge of her bed, light pouring through the window, illuminating the scattered papers around her. A single sheet rested before her, representing not just an idea but her mission to carve a niche within academic history. She needed to transform the insights she held into an organized argument, one that could withstand scrutiny and spark intellectual curiosity. The impending draft felt both exhilarating and suffocating. What if she stumbled, exposing her vulnerabilities? But as she looked out at the bright day, she reminded herself of Dr. Lewis's words. Her voice mattered, and the stories she carried deserved to be told. With a renewed sense of purpose, Emily resolved to dive in. She began typing, each keystroke a declaration of her intent. Hours passed, and the words began flowing, unexpectedly seamless. Ideas that had previously felt chaotic in her mind found structure, clarity galvanizing as she connected her research. The Victorian stories, sprinkled with wisdom, hidden in the folds of time, revealed profound lessons about resilience and female agency. Each remedy could narrate a broader narrative, one beyond mere medical practices, resonating with the socio-political struggles of women. Yet, as the word count grew, so did a creeping anxiety. What if she had misinterpreted the data? What if her analysis lacked depth? Emily halted mid-sentence, fingers poised over the keys. The internal voice of self-doubt pounced like a prowling predator, yet she refused to let it consume her. She remembered the strength of the women whose stories she was conveying, women who faced societal constraints with grit. Face the doubt, challenge it, she murmured to herself, a mantra forming against the backdrop of her swirling insecurities. Leaning back, she let thoughts coalesce. It was time to transform her fear into a driving force. Rather than shrinking under critique, she would welcome it as an opportunity for growth. With bolstered resolve, she pressed on. The introduction transformed into an enticing opener, enticing her reader with echoes of the past. Each chapter began to take shape, reflecting the intricate interplay between personal narratives and collective struggles. She could already envision Dr. Lewis's encouraging nod as she praised the connections Emily was making, affirming the merit of her perspectives. After hours of focused writing, exhaustion set in. Pressing save, Emily felt a sense of relief but also an inkling of uncertainty. Would this draft be enough to impress her mentor? As she left her workspace to grab a cup of tea, she caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. The fatigue shadowed her eyes, but perhaps the hint of determination was now visible around her jawline. The next step was just as monumental, sending the draft to Dr. Lewis for feedback. She felt queasy at the thought of exposing her work, but it was necessary. There was liberation in sharing her thoughts, letting someone else peer into her mind to help refine her arguments. What if she backpacked her doubts and took the plunge, embracing whatever feedback came? As she returned to her desk, Emily took a deep breath, readying herself to press send. But amidst the anticipation, she hesitated. What if Dr. Lewis's feedback unveiled weaknesses she hadn't noticed? The thought ignited a flicker of panic. Tapping her fingers against the table, she summoned resolve. This was part of the process. Growth required vulnerability. Taking a deep breath, she pushed through the apprehension and hit send, her heart racing in tandem with the wave of liberation washing over her. Just then, her phone buzzed. It was a notification from her inbox. The message caught her breath, an invitation to present her findings at a conference on women's history. What was supposed to be a moment of excitement unraveled her emotional steadiness. Could she really stand in front of an audience and defend her research? Doubt clawed its way back into her mind, intertwining with the thrill of opportunity. Would she stumble while presenting her work? The stakes had escalated. This was not merely about a draft, it was about stepping onto a stage she'd only dreamed of. The reality struck her. The next step required not just courage but a metamorphosis. Could she transform her burgeoning self-doubt into an empowered narrative? The journey was growing more daunting, but in its unfolding chaos lay the seeds of her professional evolution. As the adrenaline coursed through her veins, Emily stared at the screen, grappling with the question the moment had arrived. Was she prepared to rise above her insecurities and own her voice? The question loomed larger than the screen itself. Emily's heart pounded as she read the email once more, the glowing screen reflecting her initial excitement now stripped bare, revealing only her growing trepidation. Presenting to an audience felt like standing naked before the world, every insecurity magnified under the harsh lights of scrutiny. This was not a mere academic exercise, it was her chance to assert herself in the field of women's history, an opportunity that both thrilled and terrified her. She closed her laptop and took a shaky breath, the weight of the moment pressing on her chest. A conference presentation entailed not just sharing her findings but defending them against the probing questions of seasoned scholars. What if they saw her as a fraud? What if her interpretations of the historical data fell flat? Could she cope with the relentless scrutiny of an audience that might not share her passion for the untold stories of Victorian women? With her mind swirling, Emily leaned against her desk, collecting her thoughts. No, she reminded herself, this was not the time to succumb to fear. This was her project, her passion. The women she studied had faced their own battles, and if they could stand resiliently against societal expectations, so could she. The first step was acceptance. She needed to confront the doubts swirling in her mind directly. Seating herself back at her desk, she grabbed a notepad and began jotting down her fears, each one unflattering and raw. What if they challenged her? What if her ideas were dismissed? As the list grew, she transformed each fear into a counter-assertion. If challenged, I will respond thoughtfully. If dismissed, I will engage them with passion. The act of writing her fears down began to lift a bit of the weight. Next came the preparation. Emily devised a structured outline for her presentation. She could visualize it starting with an audience-capturing narrative about the remarkable women of the past, weaving in the socio-political climate that shaped their lives, and then diving deep into her analytical findings. Illustrating connections between individual experiences and broader historical phenomena became her guiding principle. Hours slipped away as she rehearsed her key points. She stood in front of the mirror, mimicking the gestures she would use to convey her passion. With each practice session, she felt her confidence build a brick laid in the wall against her insecurity. Still, the unfamiliarity of public speaking gnawed at her nerves. It demanded refinement of her message, clarity in her speech, and the poise to handle unexpected questions, all under the scrutinizing gaze of fellow academics. The night before, sleep danced just out of reach as visions of her audience haunted her thoughts. Would they nod in agreement, or would expressions of skepticism wash over their faces? It felt as if she was teetering on the precipice of a great unknown, one that could facilitate her growth or reveal her deepest fears. Yet, dawn broke with a fresh glimmer of determination. Emily awoke with a resolve strong enough to wrestle with her doubts. Today would mark a turning point. She would rise and present her research not only as a scholar but as a voice for the women buried within the annals of history. In the moments before stepping on stage, she fought back the surge of anxiety. With her heart racing, she closed her eyes briefly and visualized a room filled with empathy, an audience eager to listen and engage, not to criticize. As she stood to deliver her presentation, the weight of expectation swirled around her. With each sentence, she would forge a deeper connection not only with her audience but with the very essence of the narrative she represented. Transforming herself from an anxious scholar into a passionate advocate for the women of the past, she felt the pulse of her journey as she gained momentum, but as she began to speak, a flicker of uncertainty snaked through her, bringing forward a disconcerting thought. What if, in this attempt to reclaim their stories, she lost her own voice? The real battle had just begun. And she was determined not to lose herself amid the roar of the crowd. Emily's heart raced with both excitement and fear, the stakes now palpable as she learned to navigate this pivotal moment. Would she truly rise to the occasion, or would the weight of expectation become too heavy to bear? The spotlight caught Emily just right, its brightness both a shield and a glare. As she began to speak, her voice quivered with an unfamiliar blend of authority and vulnerability. The words poured forth from her, a wellspring of researched facts and heartfelt narratives. Each tale she wove was a thread in the fabric of women's history, and she felt an urgency propelling her to honor those lost voices. Yet, as she spoke, the flickering self-doubt that had lingered at the edges of her mind threatened to engulf her focus. A smattering of hands shot up with questions as she reached her most impactful conclusion. Each hand seemed to reach for her, pulling her deeper into the storm of inquiry. She initially floundered, caught off guard by the intellectual sparring. These were not just critics, they were esteemed colleagues, each perhaps representing varied opinions that could dissect her work before the very audience she had envisioned as allies. Can you elaborate on how your findings might challenge current understandings of Victorian women's roles? One scholar asked with a furrowed brow. The intention was clear, this was not merely an inquiry for passion's sake but a challenge. Emily felt a flush creep up her neck, but instead of cowering, she embraced the moment. Absolutely, she responded, finding her footing in the debate. What my research reveals is that women's contributions were not secondary but integral to the societal framework. The questions continued, growing more complex and nuanced as she navigated through her responses. With each interaction, the initial pressure of insecurity began to morph into a fervor. The room's atmosphere was no longer that of scrutiny, but rather an exchange. She was a participant in a historical dialogue, illustrating her interpretations and reasoning. As the discussion continued, Emily noticed herself drawing upon not just her research, but her own life experiences, invoking emotions that resonated with the themes of resilience and transformation. Her voice, once a timid whisper, grew stronger as she recalled the stories of the women whose paths she examined. Each anecdote she shared was a reminder not only of their struggles but of what she herself had fought to achieve in her turbulent journey through academia. Yet, just as a precious victory loomed ahead, a lingering self-sabotage whispered in the back of her mind, was this enough? The question bloomed like a dark flower, casting a shadow over her hard-earned confidence. After the session ended, the applause felt genuine, but she quickly retreated to the side of the stage, needing air away from the cacophony of voices. Leaning against a wall, Emily breathed deeply, absorbing the gravity of what had just transpired. The applause was comforting, yet within the rush of adrenaline, she confronted her inner critic, honing in on the sense of dread that persisted. Had she said all that needed to be said? Had she honored those women, or merely addressed the academic standards? In a quiet moment, she questioned whether this was a stepping stone or merely a plateau. The thought of surrendering to the enforced limitations of academic expectation loomed dangerously close. Could she steer her future into realms beyond rigid scholarship? With this burgeoning realization, Emily began to see a horizon of possibilities. A new journey beckoned, one that would allow her to write not just for academia but for a broader audience who might find inspiration in the women she championed. Harnessing the energy from the conference, the thought ignited a fire within her, but that bold spark also fired the tempest. The confrontation with self-doubt had only just begun. How could she bridge the gap between scholarship and activism? What paths lay before her now? This dichotomy of self-discovery pushed her to the brink of a decision still shrouded in uncertainty. And as she stood alone, wrestling with the implications of her presentation, a new challenge loomed on the horizon, the impending need to reconceptualize her work and how she would engage the world moving forward. Would she emerge emboldened and ready to expand her voice, or would she retreat back into the comfortable confines of academia, silencing the transformative discourse she had begun? Emily Harper sat at her desk, the warmth of the late afternoon sun spilling through the window, illuminating her scattered notes and half-finished drafts. The conference loomed large in her mind, and the bittersweet weight of recent triumphs hung in the air. She had presented her research on Victorian remedies for women's health, harnessing lost voices from history, yet each round of applause felt like a reminder of her ongoing battle against self-doubt. Recalling the engaged faces of her peers during her presentation sparked a realization: she was not merely recounting historical narratives but showcasing their inherent resilience. Each question posed during the discussion had transformed into a dialogue she never anticipated. Yet now, seated alone in her workspace, a flicker of uncertainty re-emerged. What came next? As she pondered her next steps, clarity emerged. Emily was determined to translate the energy from the conference into actionable results. Inspired by her melding of personal and scholarly insights, she envisioned a project that combined rigorous research with community outreach, a platform for amplifying women's stories, past and present. In that moment, a plan solidified. She would conduct a series of workshops where she could engage women from diverse backgrounds, inviting them to share their health narratives. Her vision took root, a powerful intersection of personal testimony and historical research that could challenge prevailing narratives in women's health today. This was the realization she had long awaited: the synthesis of knowledge and action. Bolstered by her present accomplishments, she felt ready to push beyond the confines of academia's walls. Days passed quickly as Emily meticulously planned the workshops, overlaying her historical findings with contemporary relevance. She reached out to local organizations that advocated for women's health, crafting invitations and flyers that emphasized the importance of collective storytelling. Each time she sent an email or made a phone call, she felt her confidence solidifying. Her voice had found a new resonance, one that championed inclusivity and empowerment. As the workshops unfolded, Emily witnessed transformations that exceeded her expectations. Women of all ages and experiences shared their stories, painfully recounting struggles that echoed the challenges of the Victorian era. Through this process, the emotional gravity of their narratives ignited a sense of solidarity in the room. Emily facilitated dialogues that drew connections from history to present-day challenges, reframing the discussions around women's health and agency. Finally, the culmination of her workshops would manifest in a community event where these narratives would be showcased, presenting both oral history and visual art that depicted women's health journeys. Through her commitment to honoring their voices, her own sense of purpose crystallized like never before, linking her identity as a scholar with her newfound role as an advocate. On the day of the event, the gallery was alive with anticipation. Emily stood before a crowd of women and allies, an array of emotions swirling within her. Memories of insecurity threatened to seep in, but she stood firm, driven by her deep-seated belief in the value of these shared stories. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. Today, we celebrate not just our historical legacies, but the courage we exhibit in our experiences. Every story you've shared is a gift that can reshape our understanding of health and identity. Together, we are stronger. As her words resonated through the room, she felt empowered, liberated by the very act of sharing. The applause that followed felt different than it had before. It was not just recognition, it was an acknowledgement of a collective journey, a healing narrative forged in shared honesty. She felt deeply satisfied, having danced on the threshold between her personal aspirations and professional growth. In unveiling and advocating for women's health narratives, Emily had transformed her academic inquiry into a meaningful call to action that reverberated beyond her own story. Ultimately, she emerged with a solid confidence, well recognized not just for her scholarship, but also for her commitment to raising others' voices. Now, in a vibrant community filled with stories of resilience, she held the promise of a future replete with possibilities, a world in which women's health could be markedly redefined. The sun dipped below the horizon as Emily reflected, knowing this was just the beginning. You need to subscribe now to not miss future emotional stories that inspire change. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Seriously, it makes a difference for all of us. Comment your reactions and theories about Emily's transformative journey. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second.